There are places on Earth where weird things happen every day. The line between real life and nightmares gets mixed up. Even smart people start to wonder what they know is true. In southeastern Massachusetts, a 200-square-mile area has a scary name. This name goes far past its small towns. Local cops don't like to talk about it. Scientists can't figure out what happens there. But the stories keep coming. Families tell them from parents to kids. People swear they've seen things that can't be real. Welcome to the Bridgewater Triangle. Here, the strange has become normal and scary. The name was first used by monster hunter Loren Coleman in the 1980s. But weird things in this triangle-shaped area have been written down for over 300 years. The edges are marked by the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. The Hockomock Swamp sits like a dark heart in the middle. Native Americans called this area Hockomock. The name means place where spirits live. They stayed away when they could. Maybe they knew something we're just starting to learn. The Wampanoag tribe lived in this area for thousands of years before white people came. They talked about the swampland in quiet voices. Their old stories tell about Hockomock as a place where the spirit world came close to our world. Medicine men would go into the swamp to look for visions, but even they were very careful. The swamp was said to be home to old spirits. Some were nice, others were not. When English settlers came in the 1600s, they quickly learned to share the Wampanoag's fear. Early records talk about strange lights moving through the swamp at night. Farm animals would disappear without any sign. Travelers said they heard voices calling to them from the dark. These voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The Bridgewater area was important in King Philip's War. This was a bad fight between Native Americans and English settlers from 1675 to 1678. The swamp was a hiding place for Wampanoag warriors. But even during this desperate time, some tribe members would not enter certain areas. They talked about places in Hockomock where the spirits were too angry, too dangerous to meet. After the war ended, the living Wampanoag were forced from their home. As they left, tribe elders put a curse on the area. They made sure that the white settlers would never find real peace on the stolen land. You might not believe in curses, but the strange things that happened next are written down in old records and town histories. By the early 1700s, the Bridgewater Triangle had earned its first official notice as a place of weird events. The Massachusetts Bay Colony set up a group to look into reports of unnatural problems in the area. Their findings are kept in old files. They tell about sightings of big, unknown creatures. They talk about fires that burned without wood. They report sounds that could not be explained. One very detailed story comes from Reverend Samuel Hopkins. He worked at the Bridgewater Church from 1721 to 1769. In his personal journal, Hopkins wrote a lot about the strange things his church people reported. He wrote about beasts of huge size and mean look that were seen moving through the swamp. These creatures, many people said, walked on two legs like men, but they had the look of wild animals. Hopkins also wrote down reports of ghostly lights that danced above the swamp on clear nights. These lights, he noted, moved like they were smart. Sometimes they would come close to travelers before going back into the dark. Unlike swamp gas or other natural things, these lights seemed to react to people in ways that meant they could think. The Reverend's journal entries show his fight to match these stories with his religious beliefs. As a Puritan minister, Hopkins wanted to dismiss such tales as silly beliefs, but the sameness of the reports worried him. His own time, seeing weird lights, forced him to think that something truly odd was happening in his area. During the Revolutionary War, the swamp was a hiding place again, this time for Continental Army forces running from British patrols. Military records from this time talk about unusual meetings in Hockomock. Soldiers reported hearing battle cries and musket fire echoing through the swamp when no enemy forces were there. Some said they saw ghostly figures moving between the trees. These figures disappeared when people got close. Captain Jonas Williams of the Massachusetts militia wrote to his commanding officer about something that happened during a scouting trip in 1778. Williams and his men were moving through the swamp at dawn when they heard marching feet nearby. Thinking they had found British forces, the militia got ready for battle. Instead, they watched in shock as a line of see-through figures in Native American dress passed through their group without seeing them. Williams wrote about the ghosts in detail. He noted their war paint and old weapons. He wrote that the phantom warriors moved with purpose. They acted like they were still fighting a battle that had ended 100 years before. The whole meeting lasted several minutes before the figures faded away. This left Williams and his men shaken but not hurt. The 1800s brought factories to the area, but it did little to reduce the strange happenings. If anything, the mix of people and old mysteries seemed to make the events stronger. Mill workers reported seeing huge bird-like creatures flying over the factories at sunset. These birds had wingspans of more than 20 feet. They looked nothing like any known birds in the area. Railroad workers had their own set of weird meetings. The old Colony Railroad ran through the heart of the Triangle. It became well known among workers for its ghost activity. Train crews reported fake signals that appeared and disappeared with no reason. Others told about meetings with ghostly figures standing on the tracks. These figures vanished moments before the train hit them, but left no sign of being hit. One of the best-written incidents involved conductor Thomas Murphy in 1891. Murphy was running a freight train through the swamp when he spotted a woman in white standing right on the tracks ahead. Even though he blew the whistle and used the brakes, Murphy knew he couldn't stop in time. He got ready for the crash, but the train passed through the figure without hitting anything. Shaken, Murphy stopped the train and looked around the area. He found no trace of the woman, but he found that the train's headlight had broken for no reason. Murphy's story was backed up by his fireman. Later checks showed that 3 other train crews had reported similar meetings at the exact same spot. The railroad company put in more signals and lights in the area. Workers said these things were more for peace of mind than real safety. The turn of the 1900s marked a new time in the Triangle's written history. As communication got better and more people could read, more detailed stories of strange meetings began to come out. Local newspapers started reporting on the unusual incidents, though editors often treated the stories with doubt. The Bridgewater Independent ran several articles about animal attacks that hurt local farms. Farm animals were found dead with unusual wound patterns. These didn't match any known predators in the area. The victims showed signs of huge trauma. They looked like they were attacked by creatures of enormous size and strength, but no tracks or other physical proof could be found at the scene. Dr. William Bennett was a vet who looked at many of these dead animals. He wrote in the Medical Journal of Massachusetts that the injuries were unlike anything in my work experience. Bennett noted that the wounds seemed to be made by claws or teeth far bigger than those of bears or wildcats. These were the biggest predators native to the area. He guessed that the attacks might be the work of escaped zoo animals. Though no zoos or circuses reported missing creatures, the mystery got deeper in 1908. Several witnesses reported seeing a huge, hairy creature moving through the swamp on 2 legs. The beast was said to stand nearly 8 feet tall. It had long arms and glowing red eyes. Unlike the ghostly appearances reported in earlier centuries, this creature seemed real. It left footprints and broken plants behind. The first detailed report came from dairy farmer Robert Chase. His property was next to the swamp. Chase was checking on his cattle one evening when he heard an otherworldly howl echoing from the tree line. Moments later, a huge, ape-like creature came out of the forest. It began walking toward his herd. Chase said the beast had coarse, dark hair covering its whole body. Its eyes reflected light like those of a wild animal. Grabbing his rifle, Chase fired 2 shots into the air. He hoped to scare the creature away. The beast stopped. It looked at him with smart eyes. Then it slowly went back into the swamp. Chase later found several big footprints near the spot where the creature had stood. The prints were nearly 18 inches long. They showed clear toe marks. Word of Chase's meeting spread quickly through the local community. Within days, other residents came forward with their own sightings of the creature. Mary Sutton lived on the opposite side of the swamp. She reported seeing the same beast looking through her kitchen window one night. She said its face was almost human but with heavy brow ridges and a flat nose. The sightings led to a brief look by state authorities, but no physical proof could be found. The official report said that the witnesses had likely met a bear. Several animal experts who looked at the case had doubts about this idea. As the decades passed, the creature sightings became a regular part of life in the Triangle. Residents made an informal network for sharing information about meetings, though they rarely talked openly about their experiences with outsiders. The entity became known locally as the Hockomock Monster, or simply the Beast. Local families began to pass down unwritten rules about living in the Triangle. Children were taught never to go into certain parts of the swamp alone. Farmers learned to bring their animals in before sunset during certain times of the year. Fishermen knew which parts of the waterways to avoid when the moon was full. These steps were born from generations of experience with the weird. Families who had lived in the area for decades got an almost sixth sense about when conditions were right for unusual activity. They could sense when the air felt different, when the very air seemed charged with an energy that made both animals and people uneasy. The local cemetery in Freetown became another focus of strange activity during this time. Visitors reported seeing figures moving among the headstones at night. These weren't the see-through ghosts described elsewhere. They appeared solid and real until people got close. Then they would simply vanish as if they had never been there at all. Groundskeeper William Foster worked at the cemetery for over 30 years. He kept detailed notes about the unusual incidents he witnessed. Foster described meetings with visitors who weren't quite right. They would come to him asking about graves that didn't exist. When he tried to help them, they would become confused and walk away. Later, he would realize he couldn't remember their faces clearly, no matter how recent the talk had been. Foster also noted that certain parts of the cemetery seemed to affect electronic equipment. Flashlights would dim or fail completely in specific areas. His radio would pick up voices speaking in languages he didn't know. The voices would fade when he moved to other parts of the grounds. He began carrying backup equipment and learned to avoid certain areas after dark. The 1960s brought a new wave of strangeness to the region. UFO sightings, which had been rare in earlier decades, began happening more often. Witnesses described objects of various shapes and sizes. They saw classic flying saucers and triangular craft that moved silently through the night sky. One of the most important sightings happened in October 1967. Multiple witnesses reported a large, disc-shaped object hovering over the swamp for nearly an hour. The craft was described as metallic. It had a series of bright lights arranged around its edge. Unlike typical UFO meetings, this object seemed to be doing some kind of careful survey of the area below. Police officer David Morrison was among the witnesses to this event. Morrison was on patrol when he got several calls about strange lights over Hockomock. He drove to a high spot where he could see the swamp. Morrison confirmed there was an unusual aircraft. He described it as unlike any plane or helicopter I'd ever seen. He noted that it made no sound, despite its big size. Morrison watched the object through binoculars for about 45 minutes. Then it suddenly shot upward and disappeared. His official report was filed with both local and state authorities. It gave precise details about the object's appearance and behavior. The report was classified and not released to the public for several decades. Other officers began reporting similar meetings throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Massachusetts State Police created a plan for responding to UFO calls in the Triangle area. Though they avoided telling people about their procedures, former State Trooper Michael Santos served in the region during this period. He later revealed that officers were told to write down all unusual aerial sightings, but they were told to avoid discussing their observations with the media. The ghost activity wasn't limited to creature sightings and UFO meetings. Throughout the 1970s, residents reported more and more poltergeist-like events in their homes. Furniture would move without reason. Electronic devices would break down. Families would hear footsteps in empty rooms. Margaret O'Brien lived in a farmhouse that had been in her family for 3 generations. She began experiencing unusual activity shortly after her husband's death in 1974. At first, she blamed the incidents on grief and stress. Doors would open and close on their own. Kitchen cabinets would be found open in the morning despite being closed the night before. Her television would change channels by itself. The activity got worse over several months. O'Brien would hear her late husband's voice calling her name from other rooms in the house. When she looked, she would find the rooms empty, but the temperature would be much colder than the rest of the house. She began keeping a journal of these incidents. Her records show that the activity followed patterns, getting stronger during certain phases of the moon. O'Brien's neighbors began experiencing similar events around the same time. The Johnson family reported dishes moving in their kitchen cabinets. The Martinez family found their furniture rearranged when they returned from work. These weren't random happenings. The changes seemed on purpose, as if an invisible presence was trying to communicate something. The Freetown State Forest, which covers much of the Triangle's forested area, became a focal point for these strange happenings. Hikers and campers reported feeling watched while in the woods. This happened even when no other people were around. Some described hearing voices calling their names from deep within the forest. Others reported temporary confusion, losing their way on familiar trails for no clear reason. Park ranger Jennifer Walsh wrote down several such incidents during her time in the 1980s. Walsh noted that certain areas of the forest seemed to affect visitors more than others. She found several hot spots where people always reported unusual experiences. These locations, she saw, often matched with areas that had historical importance to Native American tribes. Walsh's reports described instances of compasses spinning wildly. Electronic equipment would fail for no reason. Temperature drops of 20 degrees or more would happen within small areas. She also noted that some visitors would enter the forest in good spirits, but come out feeling sad or anxious. It was as if the location itself had affected how they felt. One really disturbing incident involved a group of Boy Scouts camping in the forest during the summer of 1983. Scoutmaster Tom Bradley was leading 12 boys on a weekend camping trip. They had camped in the same area several times before without incident, but this trip was different from the start. The boys complained of having vivid, disturbing dreams on the first night. Several woke up claiming they had heard voices outside their tents. Bradley at first dismissed these as typical camping fears, but he began to take the complaints seriously when he started experiencing unusual events himself. On the second night, Bradley was awakened by the sound of someone walking around the campsite. He could clearly hear footsteps circling the tents, but when he looked outside, he saw nothing. The footsteps continued for nearly an hour before finally stopping. In the morning, he found a circle of footprints around their camp. The prints were human-like, but larger than any of the scouts' feet. The group decided to leave a day early. As they packed their equipment, several boys reported feeling dizzy and sick. One boy, 12-year-old Kevin Walsh, became so confused that he couldn't remember where he was. Bradley had to help him back to the parking area. Kevin got better completely once they left the forest, but he had no memory of the final hours at the campsite. The 1980s saw the start of more organized research into the Triangle's events. Monster hunter Lauren Coleman, who gave the area its name, began doing systematic looks of the reported incidents. Coleman's research showed patterns that had gone unnoticed by casual observers. Coleman found that many of the sightings clustered around specific dates and times of year. Creature meetings peaked during the autumn months. This was really true around the time of the full moon. UFO sightings were most common during the spring and summer. They often happened just after sunset. Poltergeist activity seemed to follow no seasonal pattern. but it tended to affect families who had recently moved into the area. These patterns suggested that the events might be cyclical rather than random. Coleman guessed that certain environmental factors might trigger or make the unusual happenings stronger. Maybe these factors were related to geological features of the swamp. He noted that Hockomock sits on top of several underground waterways. The area's unique geology might create conditions that support ghost activity. Coleman's looks also showed connections between current events and historical incidents. He found records showing that similar waves of activity had happened in the past. These often occurred during periods of social upheaval or environmental change. The Revolutionary War period, the Industrial Revolution, and both World Wars had all matched with increases in reported events. The researcher also wrote down a disturbing pattern involving missing persons in the triangle. Over the decades, a higher-than-average number of people had vanished in the area. Some were eventually found, often with gaps in their memory about what had happened to them. Others were never seen again. The disappearances didn't follow any obvious pattern in terms of age, gender, or circumstances. One case that really troubled Coleman involved the disappearance of hiker Janet Morrison in 1979. Morrison was an experienced outdoors woman who knew the Triangle area well. She had gone for a day hike in the Freetown State Forest and never returned. Search teams looked through the area for weeks but found no trace of her. 2 years later, Morrison reappeared at a hospital in Rhode Island. She was found wandering along a highway with no memory of where she had been. Medical checks showed that she was in good health despite having been missing for 2 years, but she had no explanation for where she had been or how she had survived. Her last clear memory was of starting her hike in the forest. Morrison's case was not unique. Similar incidents of people vanishing and reappearing with memory gaps had been reported throughout the Triangle's history. These cases were often dismissed by authorities as runaways or people who had chosen to disappear, but the consistency of the memory loss and the physical condition of the returnees suggested something more unusual was happening. The 1990s brought new technologies that allowed for more advanced documentation of the Triangle's mysteries. Video cameras, audio recording equipment, and electromagnetic field detectors became standard tools for investigators. However, the technology also showed how hard to catch and unpredictable the events could be. Research teams would set up monitoring equipment in areas with high activity. They would record hours of normal readings. Yet, on the rare occasions when something unusual did occur, the equipment would often break down, or it would produce readings that couldn't be explained by normal science. Cameras would show weird light anomalies. Audio equipment would capture voices speaking in unknown languages. Electromagnetic detectors would register spikes that had no known source. One really puzzling case involved ghost investigator Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She spent 3 months monitoring electromagnetic activity in the swamp during 1994. Mitchell's equipment detected regular pulses of electromagnetic energy coming from specific locations within Hockomock. The pulses occurred at precise intervals. They seemed to come from deep underground. Mitchell's findings suggested that the swamp might sit on top of natural electromagnetic anomalies. These could explain some of the reported events. Electromagnetic fields are known to affect human perception. They could potentially cause hallucinations or feelings of unease. However, Mitchell's readings were far stronger than typical geological formations would produce. This led her to guess about unknown sources of energy beneath the swamp. The investigator also found that the electromagnetic pulses seemed to get stronger during periods of high ghost activity. When creature sightings increased, the underground energy readings would spike. When UFO encounters were reported, the electromagnetic patterns would become more complex. This connection suggested that the underground energy might be connected to the surface events in some way. Mitchell's work was cut short when her equipment began breaking down in ways that couldn't be explained by normal wear or environmental factors. Cameras would show distorted images even when pointing at empty areas. Audio recorders would play back conversations that had never been recorded. Her electromagnetic detectors would show readings that were physically impossible, according to the manufacturer's specifications. The new millennium brought no decrease in the triangle's mysterious activity. If anything, the events seemed to adapt to changing times. New types of encounters were being reported alongside the traditional sightings. Witnesses began describing meetings with entities that seemed to phase in and out of visibility. These were creatures that appeared solid one moment and see-through the next. Modern technology has provided new tools for documenting these meetings, but it has also shown the limits of scientific equipment when confronted with truly unusual events. Digital cameras capture orbs of light that move with apparent intelligence. Audio equipment records sounds that exist outside the normal range of human hearing, yet these recordings often raise more questions than they answer. The consistency of witness reports across different time periods has impressed even doubtful researchers. People who have never heard of the triangle's history often describe meetings that match accounts from centuries earlier. This suggests that either the events are real or that some aspect of the location itself consistently triggers similar types of hallucinations or wrong perceptions. Cell phone technology has created new opportunities for documentation, but it has also shown new patterns of equipment failure in the triangle. Phones will lose signal in areas where coverage should be strong. GPS devices will show wrong locations or fail to work entirely. These breakdowns happen consistently in certain areas, regardless of the service provider or type of device. Local emergency services have had to adapt their procedures to account for these tech failures. Rescue teams carry backup communication equipment when operating in the triangle. They use older, analog devices that seem less susceptible to the interference that affects digital technology. Even with these precautions, search and rescue operations in the area remain challenging. The internet age has made it easier for witnesses to share their experiences with a wider audience. Online forums and social media groups dedicated to the triangle have shown that the events are far more widespread than previously documented. People who might never have spoken about their experiences in person are willing to share their stories anonymously online. These digital platforms have also allowed researchers to identify new patterns in the reported activity. Geographic information systems can map sighting locations with precision. Database analysis can identify temporal patterns that might not be obvious from individual reports. Yet, despite these technological advances, the fundamental mystery of the triangle remains unsolved. The consistency of certain types of encounters across different decades is striking. The descriptions of the large, hairy creature have remained remarkably similar from the early 1900s to the present day. Witnesses who have never met each other provide matching details about the creature's appearance and behavior. This consistency across time suggests either a real phenomenon or a shared psychological response to the environment. UFO sightings in the triangle have evolved somewhat over the decades. Early reports described simpler objects, often disc or cigar-shaped. Modern sightings include more complex craft, with multiple lights and apparent ability to change shape. This evolution mirrors the broader development of UFO reports worldwide, but the triangle sightings maintain certain consistent characteristics that distinguish them from reports in other areas. The electromagnetic anomalies first documented in the 1990s continue to be detected by modern equipment. Current researchers using more advanced instruments have confirmed and expanded on earlier findings. The underground energy sources appear to be more complex than first thought. They seem to interact with surface events in ways that suggest a deeper connection between the geological and ghost aspects of the triangle. Today, the Bridgewater Triangle continues to generate new reports of unusual activity. Social media and online forums have made it easier for witnesses to share their experiences. This has shown that the events are far more widespread than previously documented. Yet, increased attention has not led to any definite explanations for what occurs within this mysterious region. The triangle remains an active area of investigation for researchers from various fields. Ghost investigators continue to document new meetings. Geologists study the area's unique features. Anthropologists look at the connection between current events and Native American beliefs. Yet none have provided a complete explanation for why this particular location generates such consistent reports of the impossible. Recent investigations have focused on the possibility that multiple factors might combine to create the triangle's unusual properties. The area's unique geology, its historical significance, and its psychological impact on visitors might all contribute to the reported events. Some researchers suggest that the triangle might be a place where normal physical laws operate differently. Others propose that the location serves as some kind of gateway or portal to alternate realities. The role of human consciousness in the triangle's events has become a growing area of interest. Some investigators theorize that certain locations can amplify or focus human psychic abilities. In this view, the triangle might be a place where the boundary between mind and matter becomes more permeable. Thoughts and emotions might manifest in ways that appear to be external phenomena. Local residents have learned to live with their area's reputation, though most prefer not to discuss their experiences with outsiders. They know which roads to avoid after dark. They understand which sections of forest feel different from the rest. They recognize which nights of the year seem to bring increased activity. This practical knowledge, passed down through generations, suggests that whatever occurs in the triangle is real enough to warrant genuine caution. The events show no signs of getting smaller. New witnesses continue to come forward with accounts that add to the ever-growing collection of unexplained meetings. Each new report reinforces the triangle's status as one of America's most persistently mysterious locations. The area continues to challenge our understanding of reality and our place in it. Modern research has also shown connections between the Bridgewater Triangle and other locations around the world with similar reputations. These places, sometimes called window areas or thin places, share certain characteristics. They often have geological anomalies, rich folklore traditions, and long histories of unusual events. The global pattern suggests that the triangle might be part of a larger, worldwide network of locations where normal reality operates differently. The economic impact of the triangle's reputation has become significant for the local area. Tourism related to the ghost events brings visitors and revenue to the region, but this attention also brings challenges. Increased traffic in sensitive natural areas can damage the environment. The sensationalism that often comes with ghost tourism can trivialize the genuine experiences of local residents. Educational institutions have begun to take notice of the triangle as well. Several universities have conducted studies in the area. Psychology departments examine the social and cultural factors that contribute to ghost beliefs. Geology departments investigate the area's unique electromagnetic properties. Anthropology departments study the continuation of indigenous spiritual traditions in the modern era. The media attention surrounding the triangle has been a double-edged sword for researchers and residents alike. Television shows and documentaries have brought national attention to the events, but they have also sometimes sensationalized or misrepresented the genuine investigations being conducted. Serious researchers must balance the need for publicity to fund their work with the risk of having their findings distorted for entertainment value. Despite decades of investigation, the fundamental questions about the Bridgewater Triangle remain unanswered. What forces operate within this seemingly ordinary patch of Massachusetts countryside? Why do centuries of witnesses describe such similar meetings? And why does modern technology consistently fail to provide clear answers about the events reported there? The triangle's resistance to easy explanation may be part of its enduring appeal. In an age where satellite imagery can map every corner of the Earth, where scientific instruments can detect the most subtle environmental changes, there is something compelling about a mystery that refuses to be solved. The triangle represents a challenge to our assumptions about the nature of reality itself. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the triangle is not what happens there, but what it suggests about the limitations of human understanding. If genuine anomalies can persist for centuries in a well-populated, thoroughly documented area, what does this say about our grasp of the fundamental laws that govern our world? The triangle forces us to confront the possibility that reality is far stranger and more complex than we typically assume. The ongoing nature of the events also raises questions about the future. Will the triangle's unusual properties persist indefinitely? Will advancing technology eventually provide explanations for the reported anomalies? Or will new types of events emerge as human understanding and technology continue to evolve? The area seems to adapt to changing times while maintaining its essential mysterious character. For the people who live and work in the triangle, these deep questions are secondary to practical concerns. They have developed coping strategies and informal rules for dealing with their unusual environment. These strategies represent a form of folk wisdom that acknowledges realities that conventional science has yet to fully explain or accept. The Bridgewater Triangle keeps its secrets well. Perhaps that's exactly as it should be. In our age of instant information and scientific certainty, there's something valuable about a mystery that refuses to be solved. Something that reminds us that despite all our advances, there are still places on Earth where the unknown thrives. For now, the triangle waits, as it has for centuries. It harbors whatever truths lie hidden within its borders. Those truths continue to manifest in ways that challenge our understanding of reality itself. And somewhere in the mist-covered depths of Hockomock Swamp, the spirits still dwell. They watch and wait for the next curious soul to venture into their ancient domain. The triangle stands as a testament to the enduring power of mystery in an increasingly mapped and measured world. It reminds us that some questions may be more valuable than their answers, and it challenges us to remain open to possibilities that lie beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain, something that made you question what you thought you knew about the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the unexplained mysteries that surround us.